Beethoven's silence, was it his father's legacy? Right, gather round, music lovers and psychological thriller enthusiasts alike, because today we're diving into a story that makes your family Christmas dinner arguments look like a delightful tea party. We're talking about Ludwig van Beethoven, that chap who gave us some rather magnificent symphonies while slowly losing the very sense that made him famous. Coincidence? I think not. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just another tortured artist narrative, let me tell you something rather fascinating. Recent DNA analysis of Beethoven's actual hair, yes, people collected dead composers' hair like trading cards in the 1800s, delightfully morbid, has revealed some absolutely riveting secrets. Let's start with dear old Papa Beethoven, shall we? Johann van Beethoven, a name that should come with a trigger warning for anyone who's ever had helicopter parents. This man took the phrase pushy stage parent and turned it into an Olympic sport. Picture this, little Ludwig, barely tall enough to reach the piano keys without a stool, being dragged out of bed at midnight by his drunk father to perform for his drinking mates. Charming family bonding, really. Johann wasn't just demanding, he was spectacularly abusive. We're talking about a man who would beat young Ludwig for every wrong note, lock him in cellars for imperfect performances, and routinely tell him he wasn't good enough. Now, modern psychology tells us that children of alcoholics often develop what we call hypervigilance, a state where you're constantly on high alert, listening for every sound that might signal danger. Rather ironic, wouldn't you say, for someone destined to lose their hearing? But here's where it gets properly twisted. Johann was so desperate to recreate Mozart's success that he literally lied about Ludwig's age, claiming he was younger to make him seem more prodigious. The man was so delusional about his son's career that he couldn't even get basic facts straight. And when Ludwig finally had enough of this nonsense, he did something absolutely extraordinary. At 19, he petitioned the authorities to exile his own father from the city. That's right, Beethoven essentially served his father with a medieval restraining order. Goodbye, Papa, enjoy the countryside. Half your salary is now mine, thank you very much. Now, you might think this is where our story ends. Troubled childhood, artistic genius emerges, everyone lives happily ever after. But oh no, the universe had quite a different plan. Because just as Beethoven was establishing himself as Europe's most brilliant pianist, just as he was finally free from his father's tyranny, his hearing began to disappear. The timing is rather suspiciously poetic, isn't it? The very sense that his father had weaponized against him, the ability to hear every musical nuance, every wrong note that earned him a beating, slowly, methodically abandoning him. It's as if the psychological damage was manifesting physically, note by note, frequency by frequency. Recent scientific analysis has given us some fascinating clues about what actually caused this deafness. They found massive amounts of lead in his hair. We're talking 64 to 95 times the normal levels. Lead poisoning can cause progressive hearing loss, and guess what else? It can be passed down through generations, affecting multiple family members. Johann, Ludwig's grandfather, and Ludwig himself were all alcoholics, and the cheap wine they drank was often sweetened with lead sugar. So here's the delicious irony. The very substances his father used to escape his own misery, the very lifestyle that made him such an appalling parent, may have literally poisoned the family bloodline. Beethoven's silence wasn't just psychological trauma, it was a genetic inheritance wrapped up with a toxic bow. But here's what makes this story absolutely extraordinary, and why Beethoven remains endlessly fascinating. He turned this inherited poison into pure gold, While his father's legacy was abuse, alcoholism, and failure, Ludwig transformed his silence into the most profound musical statements in human history. The Ninth Symphony, his most famous work, was composed when he was completely deaf. He couldn't hear a single note of that magnificent ode to joy that's brought millions to tears. And that's rather brilliant, isn't it? The man who spent his childhood being told he wasn't good enough, who lost the very sense his father had obsessed over, created music so powerful it's still making people weep 200 years later. It's the ultimate revenge against toxic parenting, not through bitterness or destruction, but through transcendent beauty. The recent DNA studies have also revealed something else rather intriguing. Scientists have been using Beethoven mice, lab mice bred with the same genetic mutation that causes progressive deafness, to test new gene therapies. They're literally using Beethoven's name to cure the very condition that defined his later life. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is, but let's be honest about something. Beethoven wasn't exactly a delightful person to be around. He was famously disagreeable, paranoid, and had absolutely dreadful hygiene. He'd been arrested for being homeless because people thought he was a vagrant staring through their windows. The man changed lodgings constantly because landlords couldn't stand him pounding on his piano at all hours. Classic trauma response, really. Difficulty with relationships, trust issues, obsessive behavior. Yet somehow, all of this psychological and physical damage created one of humanity's greatest artistic voices. His late string quartets, composed in complete silence, are considered some of the most emotionally profound pieces ever written. Music critics call them indecipherable horrors when they were first performed. But now we recognize them as masterpieces of human expression. So was Beethoven's silence his father's legacy? In the most literal sense, quite possibly. The alcoholism, the lead poisoning, the genetic predisposition to liver disease that eventually killed him, all of these can be traced back through the family line. But here's what Johann van Beethoven could never have anticipated. His son would take this inheritance of suffering and transform it into something immortal. The father who beat his child for wrong notes could never have imagined that his son would compose his greatest works without hearing a single sound. The man who lied about his son's age to make him seem more impressive never lived to see Ludwig become genuinely legendary. The alcoholic who destroyed his family's reputation could never have predicted that the Beethoven name would become synonymous with artistic genius, and perhaps that's the most delicious irony of all. Johann van Beethoven's true legacy isn't the abuse, the alcoholism, or even the genetic damage. His legacy is that he raised a son strong enough to overcome all of it, talented enough to transform suffering into beauty, and stubborn enough to keep creating even when the world went silent around him. So the next time you listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, remember this: you're not just hearing beautiful music, you're hearing the sound of someone refusing to let their father's failures define them. You're hearing proof that sometimes the most profound art comes from the deepest pain. And you're hearing evidence that silence imposed by trauma and genetics alike can be more powerful than any sound. Rather fitting, really, that the man who couldn't hear became the composer we never stopped listening to. That's not just irony, that's pure magnificent defiance. Now then, I'd say that's quite enough family therapy for one day, wouldn't you? Do let me know in the comments what you think. Was Beethoven's deafness a curse, a gift, or simply the universe's rather dark sense of humor? I suspect Ludwig himself would have had quite a lot to say about it if only he could have heard the question.